Hello, everyone. My name is Akal, and I'm a somatic therapist as well as an astrological counselor and personal trainer. If you'd like to find out a little bit more about the work I do, you can check out the website I have posted down below the video. Also, down below the video is vaultoftheheavens.com, which is where you can go to get your specific nakshatras. You want to look at the moon, the sun, and your ascendant, with the moon being the most prominent. So, what we're looking at today is Ashlesha Nakshatra. This nakshatra is, I love it. This one's one of the fun ones for me. There's this connection to poison and kundalini energy here, and I'll get into that in a moment. Ashlesha, I will mispronounce this 1,000 times. This nakshatra, what we're going to look at specifically is the padas, the four divisions within this particular nakshatra. Now, and I guess more generally, what we're going to look at is how do all the energies, the planetary energies, intertwine in order to sort of illustrate one's life path. If this is your, let's say your moon placement here, this will kind of show you how your sort of emotional internal world is expressed out throughout your life path, from point A to point B, from birth to death. So the first energy that kind of is dominant here is the moon, because Ashlesha falls within Cancer entirely. So it's entirely within Cancer. So we're looking at a very strong position in terms of one's emotional needs. It's also about the past. It's about our ancestors. It's about home. So home, past, ancestors, those things that give you a feeling of security. So you could even say in some ways money. Money is something that gives you a feeling of security. So anything that's going to give you an emotional calm or security, it's going to kind of scratch that emotional need that the moon creates. Now, looking at the Gunas, which are the fundamental energies that underlie all creation, we have Rajasic energy at its base. So again, all the nakshatras have, the first third of the zodiac have at its base Rajasic energy, which basically means active. It's proactive activity. So these are essentially personalities that are moving through life very actively, establishing their identity. On the secondary level, we have the neutral mind, which is sattvic. Basically means clear, objective, neutral. And what's expressed here is, once again, neutral, clear, and objective, which is sattvic energy on the tertiary level. So sattva and sattva are how you come about understanding the rulership of Ashlesha, which is Mercury. Mercury is, it's very clear energy. It just moves a lot. It's very mercurial. It goes back and forth between this and that. So duality here. So this movement between this and that. So we have Moon and Mercury playing out. So very mercurial, a lot of fast movement, mixing with the sort of security needs of the Moon. And you can see possible conflicts coming up here. If you have something that's very mercurial, it's very connected to its intellect. There is the possibility of making bad decisions unless somebody cultivates their strong neutral mind through meditation, yoga, tai chi, etc. And I would say with these folks that this is really important here, because again, the association with this nakshatra is that of a serpent. It's God, the god that rules here, or the gods rather, are the nagas, which are the serpents. And again, anytime you're seeing serpentine references in sort of ancient lore, usually they're talking about kundalini energy. So this kundalini energy is that sort of latent energy that's coiled up at the base of the spine. It's that energy that as you learn to reintegrate, I would say, back the body and the intuition and one's instincts, you learn to integrate that back into your ego, into your personality. You mix it all up and you move towards becoming more whole. What you end up having is that this kundalini energy starts to rise. and it will bring you sort of otherworldly experiences. It'll give you a greater sense of connection to your body. Your extremities will get warm again. All sorts of possible manifestations of Kundalini energy here. So now looking at the padas, this particular progression, which is also associated with Ardra Nakshatra and some other nakshatras as well, I like to look at this as the, I don't know, the karmic retribution placement. And what I mean by that is that, so you have Jupiter, Saturn, and Jupiter. So Jupiter in the first pada, Saturn in the second, Saturn in the third, and Jupiter once again in the fourth. And what we're looking at here is Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and finally Pisces. And again, these are the traditional rulerships. We're not talking about, the tropical astrology, which they would talk about, Pisces being ruled by Neptune. In this particular case, we're looking at it on a more earthly level, so we're talking about Jupiter. So, first pada, Jupiter. This is kind of like early Jupiter in some way. So I tend to think of Sagittarius. The word I used that's circled here, and this is what I found on the internet, is industrious. It's fire. It's action-oriented. It's about getting things done. So Sagittarius is busy. It's a busy placement. It just is. It's often, this busyness, though, is reinforced by high-mindedness, which is what Jupiter is. So very high-minded. So Ashlesha Nakshatra has this very high-minded energy. So it could be high-minded in the sense of it's higher education, like you could say college, university, philosophy, religion, spirituality, whatever it may be. These are the pursuits. However, early on, this could be hypocritical. And what I mean by that is basically it's, do as I say, not as I do. So, again, this hypocritical really is probably the best way to say this, is that people don't follow their own advice. Now, there's a humbling that happens here. Now, these people, if they are indeed hypocritical, not following their own advice, but again, they're, getting stuff done. They're industrious. They're busy. They're going to get hit by Saturn. Saturn energy is going to play out here. Capricorn, Saturn energy, it's really, in a lot of ways, it's about, how to transmit this high-mindedness that Sagittarius sort of brought forward into practical effort, practical action, and understanding one's placement in the sort of social structure that we all live in. So what is your position, your status in the social structure? So it says here, ambition. That's the word. I like to think of it as earthly focus. So these folks could be very ambitious. Again, they're industrious, ambitious, they're getting things done, right? Mercury. Quick, fast. Again, but with all this quickness, all this fastness, it could always bring up that possibility of having anxiousness, a lot of anxious energy here, possibly. Third pada, I just put I in quotations. We're looking at Aquarius energy here now. Aquarius is still earthly focused, but it's different. It's now different. I feel like when Aquarius comes around, you're getting more objectivity. It's almost like Capricorn then develops, where it's not so concerned with the social status. It's more concerned with how we're structuring ourselves socially. And how we can basically structure ourselves socially requires objectivity. It requires the I, the individual, to be able to objectively perceive how we're organizing each other, or ourselves rather. So again, what we have here is we have this objectivity that comes in. So there's objective. Finally, Jupiter, all the way in the end here. I put circled elusive. This is Pisces. Piscean energy it's like there's a looseness of the ego, because it's not about the ego, right, at this point. It's more about, well, you can think about like Virgo, for instance. Virgo is about the sort of service to, I guess, the higher needs of humanity. Well, Pisces isn't about that. Pisces is about service to God. It's about service to the sort of ultimate picture. So elusive, that was the word I found. And like people like to think that Piscean people are very elusive. That's because the emotions are always shifting around. So you can't really kind of put their finger on what they're going to do. So I could see why I saw that word pop up. But again, referencing here this idea that this is a life path progression. So we went from a lot of high-mindedness and possibly being a bit of a blowhard in terms of like preachy to here with Jupiter at the end, having gone through this humbling process that Saturn brings about, this sort of material focus that keeps you looking here. But then you got this Jupiter energy that wants to expand back out, but now it's expanding towards God. And this brings back Kundalini energy that's associated with this. Again, you have a deep Rajasic energy at its base. So you could say that, look at that as like a pressure. So you have a strong pressure that's rising up through these individuals. And there's not a lot of tension. Sattvic and Sattvic. This is not, so it's energy that's like streaming through is one way to kind of look at that. So either, all this, and again, it's ruled by Mercury. So all this energy is streaming through and there's a lot of movement and activity. So either that activity and movement could be directed outward, which could come, basically create the feeling of anxiousness, or it can be cultivated. All that activity, all that intensity can then be cultivated through meditation, turned inward and allowed. So you allow the energy to flow within, again, operating with objectivity and discernment, allowing that energy to flow through, which then will cut back on the possibility of these people creating a bunch of negative karma, getting addicted to drugs. Again, we're talking about poisons here. So it's either poisoning the other person, poisoning themselves, because there's a secretive aspect, a secretive kind of quality to this energy here. It's a little bit secretive. And that kind of goes back to this sort of Aquarius Saturn vibe that goes on in the third pada. So that sort of secretive, objective kind of energy here, so they could poison themselves and poison others. And you won't see it coming. But again, if they're cultivated, if they're doing meditation, if they're on a spiritual path, this is an amazingly transformative placement here. A lot of pressure rising up. So I could see these people having like out-of-body experiences or, not necessarily out-of-body experiences, but, again, just sort of very deep spiritual dynamics occurring in these people's lives. Maybe out-of-body. I could see that actually. So I think I covered as much as I want to cover about this nakshatra. So I appreciate you watching the video. Thank you much.